Every day, virtually every day, we seem to hear from you things we can't do. But when you're asked, can we go back to school? I don't hear much certitude at all. I hear, well, maybe it depends. Guess what? It's rare for kids to transmit this. But I hear nothing of that coming from you. All I hear, Dr. Fauci, is we can't do this, we can't do that.
Senator Rand Paul, Republican of Kentucky, and one of the few people in public life willing to question Dr. Fauci. Dr. Fauci is not infallible, but so many in the media and so many in politics seem not to accept that. Senator Paul, welcome to Newsmax. Getting a second opinion seems like it's perfectly legitimate and perfectly American, quite frankly, but you're not supposed to do it with Dr. Fauci. Why is that?
Well, I think it's a mistake to place all of our trust in one individual. There are lots of experts. There have been people on the other side of this. There's a Scott Atlas, who's the chairman of a Department of Medicine out in Stanford. There are many other doctors and epidemiologists, infectious disease. We shouldn't rely on just one. And when we listen to all the experts, we should also remember that we're not giving them the power to dictate our lives, and we shouldn't. Ultimately, each individual in America must make their own individual choices based on the way they perceive risk. So frankly, the risks are a lot different for an 18-year-old than they are for an 80-year-old. And frankly, their behaviors with regard to this pandemic should and ought to be allowed to be different based on their own individual choices.
And we have a bit of a track record. I mean, Dr. Fauci has been wrong on some key issues, yet he still commands this authority, which, quite frankly, you know, I don't think he necessarily deserves right now. But let's talk for a little bit about schools. It seems like a no-brainer. If we don't go back to school, we're going to have untold social upheaval. Parents are really counting on this. How much is the effort to delay school openings, do you think, political?
All day long, we hear all of the naysayers and all the doomsday predictions, and none of them cite any of the facts. The facts are actually pretty good with sending kids back to school. Mortality for kids under 18 is about 1 in a million. Mortality for ages 18 to 45 is about 10 in 100,000. That's where most of our teachers would be in that range. But also, if you study contact tracing, what you find is that not only do kids rarely get it, not only do kids rarely die from it, but kids also rarely transmit the disease. And you saw this a couple weeks ago when a WHO scientist came out and she said just as much, and she quoted a study. But you know what happened? Within 24 hours, the political correctness police came out, they made her withdraw it, and if you look on the WHO website, they took down the link. It was a link to a scientific paper that said exactly what many papers are showing and what many studies are showing, is that kids rarely get this and kids rarely transmit it. So there's no excuse for not going back to school. European countries have opened most of their schools and there has been no surge. I really think that we got to get our kids back to school.
I don't know if you've ever heard this. You are a physician on Capitol Hill, one of the few there. But if you mix politics and medicine, you only get politics. And I fear that really that's what's happening regarding the school situation. You made an effective argument. I think the facts are on your side, but the hysteria out there is widespread. The media hype is extremely intense right now, and it doesn't seem like, well, it seems like a lot of school systems will not be opening up when they should.
Yeah, and see, all the hysteria now is that there's an increase and a rise in infections, and I think that is true. Some of it's testing, but there really is an increase in those who are infected. But what we're finding is there really has not been a significant increase in mortality. If you look at nationwide mortality, there's a possible uptick in the last week, but really if you look at the overall curve, it looks just like what people wanted, and that was a flattening of the curve. So we have a very flat and slowly downward trending death rate. And if you look at New York, virtually no one's dying up there anymore. And here's what's probably going to be true, and nobody can say this with certainty. We're probably not going to require herd immunity. That's about 60-some-odd%. New York has about 25% immunity, and historically a lot of viruses have burned out at much less than herd immunity. And you haven't heard this anywhere, but there's something called the break point for a disease. And the break point for a disease is when you historically look at what percentage of the people got infected before the disease seemed to disappear. Diseases do disappear sometimes, so we don't know, and I can't predict exactly when, but I think the number of how many people have to be infected and the percentage on the immunity is much lower. And I frankly think New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts have already passed that number. And the rest of us, including all the states that are hotbeds now, never got to that number. But the fortunate thing is we learned a lot of things from the mistakes of the Democrat governors in New York and New Jersey not to send patients with coronavirus back to the nursing home.
I want to roll some video now, not sound, but video from something I saw on MSNBC this morning. Big lines, I believe in Miami, of people in cars waiting for COVID-19 testing. And the reporter mentioned that some of these people were in the cars for 7 hours. I just can't imagine that that's good for you. Is this the way testing is supposed to work? I mean, if you're healthy enough to sit in the car for 7 hours, I mean, isn't that kind of counterproductive? Maybe you should just stay home if you're that concerned. What do you think of the testing situation right now?
Well, because the media has told everyone they have to be tested, everybody's showing up to be tested. And everybody's saying we need more testing. We all know the symptoms pretty well. And if somebody around you gets a headache or flu symptoms or achy joints or a fever or a cough, it's probably this virus because it's so prevalent, it's out there. The good news is if you had it, you can go back to work. And really, we shouldn't be forcing people who are immune to wear masks. It should be, yeah, it was terrible that you got this, all 10 million of you, but that's 10 million people that shouldn't have to go around looking like they're trying to do sort of theater as far as security for this disease when they are already immune.
Senator Rand Paul, yes, who did have COVID-19. Thank you very much. Good to see you on television. The whole country saw you in cartoon form this morning. Just want to show our viewers. This is by Ben Garrison. Some frustration with a Dr. Fauci. Guess who that is? Leaking things like schools stay closed and doesn't seem to care about the economy. And here's Senator Paul. That's a version of you back when you had a beard. Shut him off. Any comment? I got 10 seconds left.
Well, he needs to stay out of baseball, football, hockey, leave our sports alone, leave our schools alone. Let people make decisions. Let them make balanced decisions.
Senator Rand Paul, Republican of Kentucky. Thanks very much, sir.
Thank you.
You just watched Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing news channel, now in 65 million homes. Get Newsmax TV on all the major cable systems or go to NewsmaxTV.com and click on the Find Newsmax tab to locate us. Remember, Newsmax TV, we're real news for real people.